Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. Very excited for this episode titled Bowling for Seniors. We're going to talk about the latest and greatest regarding Washington, including their new defensive coordinator, Daronte Jones, coming from Minnesota, working under Brian Flores. Also going to talk about the updates on meetings for the East-West Shrine Bowl game. And then we'll also talk about the latest that has happened with the Senior Bowl that's ongoing as we speak with practice. My co-host will be joining me here very, very soon. Afterwards, we're going to talk about fan questions that were submitted for this episode. If you have anything you want to talk about, you want to unload, anybody that you think from the Senior Bowl, from the East-West Shrine Bowl, if you want to talk about and be able to just give your insight, we'd love to be able to have that here for you guys. But to be able to start this off, you guys kind of saw earlier this week, over the weekend for the East-West Shrine game, that I was updating people on meetings with the Commanders. Per various sources, we're providing who the Commanders met with, and I'll be able to provide them for you guys here if you guys want to take a look, just to be able to talk them off to start off this episode. So first is the offensive tackles. Garrett DiGiorio from UCLA, who's a tackle. I'm not even going to pronounce the second one. Third one is Riley Malham. Third is James Neal III, Emil Wagner, Jaden Williams, the offensive tackle from Ole Miss, Nolan Rucci from Penn State, and Micah Pettis. And so these are very important to take into consideration. So when you look at that, you're immediately going to think to yourself, why would they be interviewing tackles, right? And one thing to always take into consideration in regarding to this whenever you have meetings or guys coming out from college, it's very difficult for a guy coming out of college. Typically, the best lineman will play tackle to be able to provide and to be the blindside help for your quarterback. When you get to the next level, it's not always easy to say that they are going to play tackle. It's very hard to play tackle in the NFL. We've seen that many, many times. Even a guy like Olu Fashanu, coming out of Penn State a couple years ago, didn't immediately start there. He had to earn that right to be able to do so. It's hard to play offensive tackle. So when they have these meetings, it doesn't necessarily mean they're drafting them to specifically play tackle if they were interested in these guys and being able to acquire and bring them on. What it ultimately means is these guys could possibly slide inside. And not only inside, could they play center as well. And we've seen guys from the Senior Bowl talking about this, that they'll play multiple various positions to be able to meet any demand that the NFL has to offer. The next batch that was scheduled with the meetings was safeties, which has been a huge talking point with this fan base at the expense of Quan Martin. Unfortunately, Quan did not have the greatest year, but this was one that really got people starting to talk. And so these safeties is Austin Brown from Wisconsin. I got to see a little bit of his game. Cole Wisniewski from Texas Tech, Ahmad Moses from SMU, and Lewis Moore from Indiana. I did look at Cole Wisniewski. I watched a couple of his games, and what really stands out about this cat is that he's a former linebacker. A lot of pass breakups, very good around the ball, and actually a very sure tackler. Obviously, coming from the linebacker position, that's somebody that you would imagine is going to be a sure tackler. But for me in particular, I coached DBs this past season, and one thing I was voicing to the coaching staff, and that you guys, any fan of this show knows, what I want in a safety is a tall kind of guy. And I think Cole is about 6'2", 6'3", a bigger type of dude, and he is very good around the ball. And the reason why I like bigger, taller safeties, like Cam Chancellor, Kyle Hamilton you could use, is that deep field passing situations, that height is a massive advantage. A lot of these wide receivers that you're going against can either jump out of the gym or they're just naturally gifted height-wise. And so typically it's a mismatch going against guys like, for example, you could talk about Mikey Samerstill. So like having a guy like Cole Wisniewski, who's a former linebacker, has good range, and is very good on the ball. You saw that in the East-West Shrine Bowl of him making plays from the slot in the end zone. Obviously didn't come up with the pick there, but the pass breakups are huge. And somebody that's a former linebacker almost Pat Tillman-esque, you could say in a way, really coming through and being good on the ball says a lot about the athlete that he is. So I like the idea of Cole Wisniewski coming over here from that Texas Tech defense that's just lauded with talent all over. I think that he could be somebody that you would fit in as like that kind of strong safety off bat to be able to help you come up, make plays on the ball, but also having the range in the back end to be able to help you out and being able to nullify allowing everyone to be able to pass down the field on you. And basically being a walking doormat for most of the season, somebody like Cole Wisniewski could definitely help you in that regard. But obviously they don't have that many picks as of this moment. So it's going to be few and far between in selections, but you have to be able to look at this and say, where would they possibly go? Now, the next batch is cornerbacks. These, Brent Austin from California, Tyreek Chappell from Texas A&M, Andre Fuller from Toledo, Amari Harvey from Georgia Tech, and Devon Marshall from NC State. Devon Marshall is the very intriguing one from this list. Looking at it, he was rated by PFF at top 10 of all cornerbacks of the possible class of everyone who played corner. I think it's like over 800 or something of the prospects that they rated. And Devon Marshall, when you watch it, you can see it. In transitions, he's very glued to the hips. He's very, very good at being able to stay on his wide receivers. You almost that patient level type of corner. But what I really like about his game is that he could possibly move inside. And just given his skill set, I watched all of those guys. But Devon Marshall really is what stood out to me as somebody that could make an impact early on. And when you're talking about this defense in particular for Washington, the fit is what makes the most sense. We saw coming into this season that the fit wasn't necessarily correct, right? You had Mikey, who's a better zone corner, and you placed him in the slot, and you're telling him to be able to play press man, go man on man, be able to work with that. Doesn't really help with Mikey, so Mikey got bludgeoned. Then Mikey goes to the outside once Marshawn Lattimore is hurt. And then you start to see a little bit more. Obviously, Mikey got those interceptions. He got those picked up forced fumble. He was doing a good job in the turnover aspect, but in the cover game, was not being helped in that slot area. So the fit has to be able to work. And getting somebody like a Devon Marshall would be able to say, you leave Mikey on the outside, you got Trey Amos on the other sideline, and then you're putting somebody who was a number one corner on the outside for NC State, and it was obvious that anybody that played NC State, they were not throwing at this cat. They were going at everybody else, which would hint as to why his PFF rating is so high, because nobody wanted to go to that side. They wanted to go to the other ways to be able to help their offense out, and obviously when they went to Devon Marshall, it was bad news bears for the offense. Now, the next batch was wide receivers, which is another big one for this fan base. Obviously, the skill positions are going to rule with this fan base. They love the skill positions. They want to add as many as they possibly can to help Jaden Daniels. I get it. I'm not here to argue against it. I'm just here to provide who they have met with at the East-West Shrine Bowl. First one, Chase Roberts out of BYU. Dejon Stribling from Ole Miss. Eric Rivers from Georgia Tech. Skylar Bell from Connecticut. Michael Warham, from a wide receiver from Montana, and Emmanuel Henderson from Kansas. The one name that really stands out that everyone that was commenting had something to say about this cat was Skylar Bell. And I was able to watch him a little bit of his game. And the one thing that stands out is working out of that slot. Absolutely a menace, a speed kind of demon guy. And he has the speed to be able to do it. Height-wise, not 100%, right? But this is a playmaker type of cat. And this guy, he was heavily targeted. He was the guy that they would go to, that they wanted to get the ball to. Obviously, going against stiffer competition, it was harder for him to get the ball in his hands. But when he did, great things happened. And so somebody like Skylar Bell, just a playmaking ability, you look at it and it immediately pops off at you when you see the ball in his hands, that good things do happen. So that UConn offense doesn't get all that much love, but Skylar Bell is bringing a spotlight to them. The next batch that we have, last one, is the tight ends. And obviously this is something that the fan base would love to be able to acquire in this upcoming draft, but the lack of draft picks makes it difficult. But they interviewed Jack Andres from Texas, Jaron Kanak from Oklahoma, Lake McCree, the tight end from USC, and Sidhu Troya. I don't even know how to pronounce that last name, but I'm going to try to do my best to be able to learn up on it in this draft cycle, as we do with Deuce's show, as we're going to highlight all of these positions just a little bit more. But the one name that stood out to me here was Lake McCree. He, from USC, obviously he played with Mekhi Lemon, but that game against Notre Dame was a big indicator of what Lake McCree could do for you. He had a circus-like, a fantastic catch in the corner of the end zone where he has to high tip it, attack the football at its highest point on the corner. Obviously, their quarterback wanted to put that ball high to get it away from the corner, right? Well, Lake McCree goes up, secures the catch, and when he comes down, he gets, I think, both feet inbounds, and it's like literally at the last possible point that he could possibly do so, and he gets that foot down. Just talking about the athleticism, going up and high reaching that football. And 87 for USC, when you watch their film, he pops off game in and game out, and that's somebody looking at it, you could say, can we grow with this? Is this somebody that is a willing blocker, that is going to be able to come in and make plays when the ball is thrown to them? And I know a lot of people are talking about the free agent list. They're looking at guys like Isaiah Likely. They're looking at guys like Kyle Pitts. I'm not going to shoo away from those folk. But what I am going to say is these other teams that are in the playoffs right now, can you say, no, Super Bowl, but in the playoffs in general, do they have that playmaking tight end? That's the one question I would bring up to you guys, is do they have that guy? No. A.J. Barner from Seattle is somebody like, look, Hunter Henry, we could talk all day about Hunter Henry, but we can have that discussion. Is Hunter Henry a freak athlete? In terms of the NFL pedigree, I would say no. He is somebody who's a possession kind of catch wide receiver that has a good relationship with the quarterback. That's what you kind of need to develop. And the question that I ponder is, doesn't Washington already have that? And you're telling me that Ben Sinnott, that John Bates, that Colson Yankoff couldn't develop into that? One of the biggest reasons why these guys have a name at this point is because they are getting the ball thrown to them. And because Zach Ertz being on this roster beforehand limited their ability to get those snaps. Well, in these sort of situations, when you're kind of needed and forced into that, you kind of rise to the occasion. I think these guys can develop into that kind of tight end. I'm not saying that they're going to be Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski. I'm not saying that whatever. I'm saying is these guys are on the roster. Are we really sure that they can help this football team win games and score points? And ultimately, we still don't know that answer. It took a little bit too long to get those guys more reps. We saw Ben Sinnott pop off just a little bit. But if you're going down the draft and trying to acquire another tight end, which is never the worst idea, but I'd be willing to argue that going defense is the most freaking important thing for this football team right now. We can argue all day about the skill positions, about needing to help out Jaden. I totally get it. I do. I want to help out Jaden too. But in my opinion, the best way to help out Jaden is making sure that we're not down 21-0 by the end of the first quarter. That's what's going to help out Jaden more so than anything else. I've heard people make the argument that, well, Jaden Daniels had to put the team on his shoulders. He had to do everything because he didn't have that much talent around him. Granted, that is probably reality. That is a legit thing. But also, he had to put the game on his shoulders because we were down by 3 scores early on in games. Go back to the Packers game, right? Go to the Falcons game to look at that as well. Look at the other games that have went on for Washington where it was an utter embarrassment. Minnesota, another good example, where we made J.J. McCarthy look like Steve Young. The biggest issue was the defense. The best way to be able to help out Jaden Daniels is to give him some wiggle room in order to, I'm not going to say make mistakes, but if you go in with the mindset that you want a high-powered offense and that's it, you end up with results like the Cincinnati Bengals, who are constantly trying to make a stake in this league in the AFC and continue to fall short because they're in a conference full of legit defenses. And so they fall short typically. And what we've seen thus far in these playoffs is defenses are what really carries you in December and January. That's what sets you apart. That's what gets you to the next level. And I've heard Tim Towner in our Discord ask, what great defense has stopped a high-powered offense in the Super Bowl? Well, go back to Peyton Manning and the Broncos, that record-breaking year that they had where the Seattle Seahawks defense came in and literally just chopped them in half. That's a huge part of this entire equation. And now I am joined by my co-host, Michael Hall. What's up, buddy?
What up? Can't see your video. Maybe it's just my computer.
It's your computer. I could see myself.
What's
But
good
I was
though? Yeah, what's up?
nothing. I was just rambling as usual. But this question that we had before we get into the Senior Bowl, East West Shrine Bowl, I was just talking about building up this football team, and I know that people want skill positions. Mute when I'm not talking. When you're not talking.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
When we're talking about the building of the roster, I was discussing how the thing that would really separate Washington and be able to help provide assistance to Jaden Daniels, in my opinion, is the defense. I know that we could talk about skill positions and everything of the sort, but that's just my opinion. That's what I was just leaving off with to give you an update on it. Now, the Senior Bowl. Who has caught your eye at the Senior Bowl?
I mean, I haven't even really watched any of the Senior Bowl other than like what people, the clips that people have posted online, and yeah, I would say that there's been a couple receivers that have popped. There's been a couple edge rushers. The edge rusher from Michigan is a guy that was getting a lot of run on Twitter for that rep that he had in the
Derek
one-on-ones.
Moore, yeah, and then he got bitched.
Then he got stonewalled.
Then he got bitched by the tackle.
Yeah, I was gonna say he got stonewalled by the big dude, big right tackle, I guess it would be. After that, but yeah, the receiver from Notre Dame, I think it's Malachi Fields.
Yep,
is a guy that's looking really crisp. But we'll see what translates to the game on Saturday when they are actually doing live stuff.
yeah, and Tyron Montgomery as well, the standout wide receiver from John Carroll, which is where London Fletcher is from. So I'm sure London Fletcher is going to have a stake to say to Adam Peters when he gets anytime he passes him in the hallway or if they ever cross paths. They'll let him know about the John Carroll boy, which it's always funny how the NFL can produce guys like that. Like Antonio Brown didn't come from a top elite school, right? Like it's crazy how that can happen and how college scouts just completely miss the mark with sort of talent. And there's a very high chance that Tyron Montgomery is one of those guys. Another guy that's really reached out to me that I really liked is this kid Jennings Dunker. He looks like a Confederate soldier in 1863. He's got the cut. He's got the long locks. Right, he's party in the back, business in the front type haircut. And I like this kid from what's seeing so far. Obviously, that's somebody who he himself in his interviews has talked about. Wherever an NFL team needs me, I'll play. And obviously, he's advocating to get drafted, which is phenomenal. But the game film is what you really want to look at to see, engage how good of this cat is. But the question of center needs to be addressed. I love Tyler Badass and what he provides. But you do, because when we lost Tyler Badass for a small duration of time, there was that big question, what are they going to do at center? Who's going to play it? And it ended up being Allegretti, if I'm not mistaken. You want some long-term stability there as well. So this would not be a bad draft to go into to say we need some depth here, and somebody like this kid could easily come in and help you out just a little bit. Another guy, I did want to say, I was watching Carnell Tate, and I know we kind of briefly talked about him, but I loved his blocking, dude. If you watch that Ohio State offense, him and Jeremiah Smith, they block their butt off. And a lot of their run plays, a lot of their offensive screens really are productive and successful because of the blocking by the wide receivers. And that bumped me up a little bit with Carnell Tate, as much as it could be limited in some capacity, maybe in route running or footwork. I still think that this is somebody that could be productive in the NFL given his ability and want to block. I think that really separates guys when they get to the next level, being when the ball's not in their hands, how productive are they? And I think Carnell Tate's not going to have an issue with that whatsoever. Brian Hartline, his fingerprints are all over those wide receivers at Ohio State, and he does a fantastic job with them.
We'll see what happens now because he got a head coaching job down in South Florida. So we'll see if they keep pumping him out and if they're as polished as they are coming out now that he's gone.
Yes, and another guy, Auburn O-line, Jeremiah Wright, is another guy that really stood out. He absolutely whooped on the Alabama defensive lineman LT Overton, just completely whooped his butt. Those are a couple guys that have piqued my interest that I really enjoy. But before we go any further, before we answer fan questions, I wanted to ask you about the newest hire at defensive coordinator. This was something that last time that we recorded, I said, sooner the better, being because you're starting to interview guys. And we were interviewing guys at the East West Shrine Bowl, and you had no idea who the DC was going to be, especially defense. So how can you get the marriage of scout with coach to say, this is what I'm looking for? Obviously, you're going to interview everybody at some point, but this was a big need. And they went out and got Daronte Jones, a disciple of Brian Flores, was the passing game coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. I wanted to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, that's a guy that, and when they hired him, or when the breaking news broke and it came out, I was like, hey, if you can't get Flores the next best thing, his right hand man, why not? And I know a lot of people were hoping for Carl Scott from Seattle, and obviously for the right reasons. It's a really good secondary. They're playing in the Super Bowl right now for a reason. Really good defense, but that Minnesota Viking defense and that secondary as well is a really good unit. And again, he's the guy that's coached under Brian Flores for the past couple of years. He's going to hopefully bring his style of defense, or put a little twist on it, but bring his style of defense here. And I just I like that Dan Quinn, is kind of putting it on the line with two new offensive coordinators. And I know I said that if he goes with two offensive coordinators, or two new coordinators, I should say, sorry, and his seat won't be as hot as people think it is, especially depending on how they start, how they finish, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, I love the hire, and I love that he talked about developing players and developing coaches, and it looks like he's going that route with these two hires as far as developing young coaches into probably, hopefully one day, future head coaches. And like I said, if he's going to bring that style of Brian Flores' defense, put his little twist on it, and really preach what Joe Witt wanted to do, which was take the ball away, ball is life. I think that he'll actually bring that here. I think the DB unit gets better with him being here as well, with him having a background coaching defensive backs. And, just overall, I like the hire, and can't wait until the season starts, and can't wait to see what type of players he brings in for this team through the draft and free agency to kind of fit what he wants to do.
Yeah, it's funny because Anthony Armstrong texted me today. He just asked me, how are you feeling about the new coordinators? And I said, ultimately, I'm just glad it's done, that we finally got our direction to go into, because it just seemed like they had no idea what they were going to do. We talked about Carl Scott and talked about Al Harris coming from Chicago as a possibility. Raheem Morris was brought up. And what I really enjoy that it's finally over, that we don't have this guessing game anymore. But I love the idea of bringing in the Brian Flores right-hand man, because Brian Flores from the get-go, I really felt that he wasn't leaving Minnesota. But what you learned in Minnesota, because we looked at what Minnesota did well. When we played them, this is something I talked about at that time. I loved the way that Brian Flores was calling his defense, with the fact of standing up five, six guys on the line of scrimmage, confusing the offensive line. Because if you don't have rushers, which is ultimately what Joe Witt's problem was, is Joe Witt thought, I can rush four, no problem, and we'll preach turnovers. Let's punch the ball out. Well, now you're having missed tackles. You're not getting after the passer rushing four. You're not converting turnovers. And now you can't tackle anybody. And you're letting just easy plays to be huge gains, and which is going to cut your throat as a defense. So what I liked from Brian Flores was he was standing these guys up on line of scrimmage, confusing an offensive line, which simulates pressure, because the offensive line is confused, the quarterback is confused. I don't know who's coming, and just in the off chance that the one guy you do have rushing that they don't realize is going to have a free rush, or to help tip the scales in that kind of blocking scheme of who's supposed to be blocking where. Adding that confusion is so crucial for a defense when you can't generate pressure with just 4. So you add confusion into it just to be able to get guys away, just to be able to get them looking in the other direction, just like a magician sort of way. And that's what I really enjoy. Do I think that that's what Daronte Jones is going to come in and bring in right away? I'm not 100% sure. I'm not Daronte Jones. I don't have a relationship with him. I don't know what he's going to want to do. But I would imagine him coming from Minnesota, I said it then, it's crazy that a defensive coordinator would get so much of the spotlight of what he's done with not many big names on his defense. Like, it's very weird to see a defensive coordinator getting a lot of the shine, a lot of the spotlight, and not the players. And it's because of how he's deploying these guys. And what's fascinating about the Vikings secondary is they got Fabian Moreau on there, former Washington Redskin on their team. And they basically balled out. They were one of the best defenses in the country this season. And so coming into this, you say, well, if that's what he had in Minnesota, is it really crazy to say with Trey Amos, with Mikey Sanders still, that he wouldn't be able to at least replicate that sort of production from a defense? And ultimately, it comes back to, will he deploy that sort of aggressive style tactic in being able to get after quarterbacks to confuse them? And ultimately, I do think he will. I think that that's something that we can bank on to say that I don't think this guy's going to walk in and say, no, let's do exactly what Joe Witt was doing before, right? Like, let's continue that trend. I think he's going to go in the more aggressive style mindset, and that's just a layman idiot myself speaking on what he could possibly do.
Yeah, and to that point, I don't think that a first-time coordinator with that kind of background gets hired and then gets here and Dan Quinn says, hey, I'm going to hire you, but you're going to run my system,
right?
Implement my system, but teach my guys my system type of thing. I think he's going to come in. I think it'll be a collaborative thing. I think he'll implement what he wants to do and kind of collaborate with Dan Quinn and what he wants to do, what he likes. And I was listening to some of the people, like the beat writers that were on 106, and there was actually a guy that because Jones was a defensive backs coach, I want to say, or defensive coordinator, I think, at Bowie State. And one
LSU,
of the
he had experience at LSU too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, someone called in 106 and was like, hey, I was on that team when he was the coach there, and we were the number 1 defense in the division. I guess they're Division 2, whatever Bowie State is. But a lot of the people that were talking about him and kind of what he's going to bring here was he's a guy that's really collaborative. I think someone said that he does like what Andy Reid does, what Brian Flores like to do, which is he has like a group think tank with like the coaches and all that, where he gets a lot of input from them, gets input from the players, and really likes to adapt to what the players like to do. He's not just hey, you're going to run my type of system and do what I do what I say type of coach. He's going to say, okay, what do you do best? And let me try to teach what I know, and then get the best out of you, combined with what you already know and what you can do. So I just think that, and like you said, the creativity, hopefully they're just going to bring. And I just think that, it's a good hire. Obviously, there's going to be a learning curve with a guy that's never called plays before. But, the guy that called in – sorry.
You're okay.
Crazy. A guy that called in the 106 was saying that when he was a player there and he was getting coached by him, that his style of coaching and defense is he likes to put a lot of the onus on the defensive backs and put them in man coverage. But at the same time, he's a guy that is always going to focus on the pass rush and get into the quarterback, because that's going to help his guys on the back end.
Smart man, that guy, huh?
Yeah, so I think that he's a guy that's going to come in. He's going to try to marry the pass rush with the guys on the back end, which is something that we haven't had here in a couple of seasons.
Yeah, and a lot of credit to Dan Quinn, because he could have gone down the route of getting somebody like an Al Harris who is familiar with him, that he could kind of morph into doing what we have been doing before, right? Where he's bringing in somebody who's never been a DC in the NFL, who he saw, and I saw reports of this, that he immediately made calls around the league like, why isn't this guy a DC yet? Right? And it's speaking to how impressed Dan Quinn was. So this wasn't a search for somebody that is relative, that is familiar, that is comfortable with it. He's looking at it as saying, I just want the most impressive, great guy possible, which is how everybody should do their hiring process. Who's the best freaking dude? Let's bring him in and be able to make this thing work. And it's just the cherry on top is that where he comes from is that unique creative style mindset to simulate pass rushing. And so, which begs me to question this. I saw people speculate that bringing Daronte Jones would hint that they would draft Caleb Downs at 7, given that he worked with Harrison Smith in Minnesota. What would you say to that?
I mean, yeah, that would be a good little connect the dots type of thing. I mean, obviously Harrison Smith has been a safety in this league for one of the top 3 to 5 safeties at his position in the league for many years. All Pro player at his peak, Pro Bowl player many years. But yeah, he's a guy that's a chess piece on the back end. You can use him in the box, use him in back end pass coverage. But he's really a guy that specializes down in the box, blitzing, playing run fits, and just kind of being that robber, joker type of role. The Buffalo nickel, if you want to call it that.
He's the Bobby Wagner of their defense, right?
Exactly. So, yeah, that would definitely be a good kind of connect the dots type of thing. And I think that that would be a chess piece that not only Daronte Jones would be able to use, but Dan Quinn would have experience in using a guy like that in Cam Chancellor as well. So, yeah, I think that would be a really good move. Hopefully he would get there at 7, and we'll see that if they go that route.
Yeah, Harrison Smith, the one thing that comes out about him is that he's a taller kind of safety, which goes into what I was talking about before with Cole Wisniewski from Texas Tech. That would be a shoe-in kind of fit, the strong safety, maybe morphing into free safety and some deployment, some assets. I know that Daronte Jones likes to use multiple safety sets, multiple safeties on the field, which begs the question, like, okay, then are they going to draft a corner? Because if they want to use more safeties, and I would wager that they would probably go around the route of getting more safeties in the room. So if you're going to use less corners on the field, do you really need to use one of those very valuable draft picks on a corner at this stage, or are you going to go best player available? I've also seen people go down the route of saying, well, this could mean that he's going to get Sonny Styles at pick 7 to be able to help him with those free-ranging kind of linebackers. And I'd be willing to say, hold on a bit. We do have Jordan McGee here, who we've seen be sideline to sideline, has very good speed and being able to range across the field. Frankie Louvu, I think, could fit into that category under that kind of leadership. But also, we can't forget about Kane Medrano as well, who could easily fit into that, who has speed himself. So are we really going down the route of adding another linebacker in there? I'm not 100% sure. In regards to Caleb Downs, not as tall as a Cole Wisniewski from Texas Tech, but somebody who you feel very comfortable with going on tight ends. If he's on the tight end, you're not going there. A sure tackler, kind of the captain of that defense, you wouldn't think poorly about it. But if I was going to wager anything, given with what we know what Brian Flores liked to do in Minnesota, with the standing up of the multiple guys, having defensive ends drop back into coverage, I'd be willing to go as far as to say David Bailey is the name to circle. David Bailey, people could talk about the edge setting. They can talk about him being lighter in weight. He is a freaking bulldozer in his bull rush, is able to get after the passer, very, very smart in the way that intellectual in the way he plays football, fundamentally sound, but also he drops back into coverage. And being at that weight, that is a perfect marriage for somebody like David Bailey, who will be utilized in that way. I'm not saying to drop back into coverage constantly, but he has that usage about him. We kind of saw Jacob Martin dropping back into coverage. I mean, we all remember when we were complaining that Montez Sweat or Chase Young were brought back into coverage. Bigger kind of guys. They weren't able to move all that well. You don't have that worry or concern with David Bailey, in my personal opinion. If I was going to circle anybody, I would say it's David Bailey. To be able to help out, and you talked about it. His ideology is really pressing in on pressure on the quarterback. Getting a piece like David Bailey would really help that process along and would help with that magician style way of playing defense to say, look over here, be worried about this guy, but then sending the other 4 on the other side, having him drop back, which would tip the scales for you in your rush against a lopsided offensive line, in my personal opinion. Mitch said, sup, y'all? What's up, Mitch? Good to see you, man. He said, how you guys liking the practices and what guys have impressed you? We kind of talked about it a little bit already earlier in the broadcast, Mitch. I'm sorry. We've already gone over it just a little bit. But to stay on Twitter, I wanted to talk about a question that was submitted, this one by Tony Franchise, Who are your top 3 free agent targets, Hall, if they are available?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say this is like a either or type of thing. Two of them are going to be either or type of things. One of them would be, and this goes into kind of the Sonny Styles kind of thing. If you can get a Devin Lloyd or a Quay Walker, if they are available, hit the market. I think those are guys that could fit this defense well, guys that can run sideline to sideline, good tacklers, good blitzers, and can also drop into coverage and play coverage so as well. So those are two guys. Those are guys I would target on the defense. Um, on the offensive side of the ball, I would go with a either or of. I know a lot of people are really on like Kyle Pitts and Isaiah Likely. If those guys are going to be the top of the market, I think a guy like Cheek Gongway, the Titans.
Okonkwo?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But he used to play for the Terps. He's a Tennessee Titans tight end, but he's hitting the free agency market. And I think that he would be a great addition. He's athletic. He can run block. And he's a guy that, like I said, he's athletic, can provide some speed to this offense as well. Really good with the ball after the catch in his hands. And I would say also at receiver, if they want to go with the edge at 7 or go with the defensive player at 7 and they want to add to this offense, Alec Pierce is a guy that is going to be demanding probably top of the market wide receiver money in this coming free agency. But he's a guy that for the last 2 years has been the leading yards per catch receiver in the NFL. I think this year he averaged like 21 and a half yards a catch or something like that. He's a vertical threat. He's a very good blocker. He scored I think 8 to 10 touchdowns or something like that this year. And he's a big play threat, which this offense was lacking big plays this past season. And we've been waiting for a receiver that is young enough to be opposite of Terry McLaurin, take the pressure off Terry McLaurin, and be a good number 2 target opposite Terry McLaurin. And I think Alec Pierce fits all 3 of those things. And he's a guy that's ascending. I think he'll be hitting his prime 26, 27 years old, 20, 25 years old, something like that, hitting the market. And he's a young player that is ascending, and I think that he should be a target for this team.
I might surprise a couple people here, but I would say Brandon Ayuk for a vet minimum on a prove-it-year type deal. I think that's a shoe-in fit, given with his history with Jaden Daniels. But I'm talking about as little as possible, given with his history. You got to prove it, and being able to – because people are talking about his route running and everything. I get it. But we also have to take into consideration he hasn't played in 2 years, and we all know it takes typically 2 years for you to come back from an ACL injury, and so you'd be hitting in the right spot, right? But the mental games that he did to get to this point are a concern. Whether you want to attribute that to the conspiracy that he was just doing everything impossibly to get away from San Francisco, well, you could have done that easier if you didn't sign that contract. So I don't know why that was done, but I will say that it's a shoe-in fit. Someone that can help you if you're walking away from Debo, if that price tag is a little bit too high based on where he is. I think Brandon Ayuk would be a smart play, and that way you can have Luke McCaffrey, Treylon Burks, Jalen Lane kind of help you out in the intermediary on that wide receiver 2 type level, just to be on the outside to help you a little bit more, to shoe up some of your gaps. The other one I would honestly say is Fabian Moreau from Minnesota. Unknown name, that's some former Washington guy, but you want to
It's just crazy that he's still in the league at this point.
It is crazy, but you want for Coach Daronte to be able to bring in somebody that knows what he likes to do, and I would swap him with Jonathan Jones, right? Be able to bring somebody on who has history with him, who's familiar with it, in case of a break glass type of a situation. Maybe even start to help you in the slot. I don't know how he's looked so far. I haven't gone and done a dive deep into Minnesota's defense's film, but somebody that's just relative to the entire situation with Daronte, I think would be a very good thought process to go along. And then the other one, it's hard to say because you want them to be able to highlight things in the draft. And obviously free agency predating it kind of could tip the scales on what is possibly used, right, and to be wagering on. And I'd venture to go say it's not a cop-out answer. I'm being 100% honest. I think it's Chris Rodriguez. You only have one running back on the roster at the moment, and you only have so many draft picks. And, of course, last season I was very boisterous. I was saying you don't have to use a first-round pick on a running back. You can get very good production in this class out of a late round or undrafted free agent. And that's the route that they went down, and they got a fantastic guy in Bill. So in the same breath, I don't think that they need to go down the route of using a high-value pick on a running back. I think that you bring back C-Rod. You possibly get a UDFA in here to contribute, right? They did bring in Donovan Edwards, former Michigan running back, as was on the practice squad this season. Maybe that's somebody that gets elevated to be able to help you, kind of a sledgehammer in the backfield there. Now, I think C-Rod, given with how he played this season, we all know coming into the season he shed a bunch of weight. You saw that speed come alive. His productivity was fantastic, and he's reliable with the football in his hands, especially in those cold weather games. And I think him and Bill would be a fantastic thunder and lightning type of aspect to that running game. And I would love for C-Rod to come back. So those are my three, Tony. Now, the next question that we have was someone was submitted in the Discord by our guy, Jeff Miles. List your ideal realistic starting defense, Hall. Rookies, trades, free agents, etc. I would like to see what this defense best suits our new DC.
I gotta like pull up some of the upcoming like free agent people and whatnot. But I already said I know a lot of people are talking about Daron Payne, but I would say I want to stick with Daron Payne, but hopefully he's able to restructure or something like that and lower that $28 million cap hit down. Kinlaw, obviously at the other D tackle. I would say at number 7, draft David Bailey as the edge. And I'd say, depending on where he's at in his recovery, but Dorrance Armstrong at the other edge. Linebackers, I'll go with Frankie Louvu and Jordan McGee. I'll only do 2 linebackers because I know a lot of the people are saying that the new DC likes to run a 4-2-5 type of defense. To your point about like a couple, like 3 safeties or like extra DB or 2 on the field. So the 2 linebackers I'll say are Frankie Louvu and Jordan McGee. And then secondary, Amos on the outside, Will Harris at safety. On the outside, I guess I got to go with Mikey Samerstill for right now, just because I'm trying to think of someone on the outside, unless they're going to draft like a rookie at some point in the draft and let them compete. But I'll go Amos on the outside. And then at safety, I'd have to look at the upcoming safeties and free agency, but I'll say free agent X at safety as well. And I need one more because that's probably 9 or 10 players. Let's say 4 defensive players, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I need one more. And then the extra DB. I'll say to your point, Fabian Moreau, just because he's upcoming free agent and they need somebody that's going to be able to come in and kind of teach the DB room and be that translator to the guys, the newer guys for the system.
Yeah, very good translator. I like that. I think along the defensive line, I do think that Daron Payne should be retained, especially in this sort of style where you could get those mismatches with the offensive lineman. I think Daron Payne would eat in that regard. Johnny Newton, obviously, is going to stay there and stay put. Javon Kinlaw, did he sign a multi-year deal? I think it was, a 2 or 3 year deal? So he's back.
3-year deal, but you can get out of it after the second year, so he'll be here next year.
Yeah, so with them, like, it's kind of solidified. If you wanted to add another body in the draft or a UDFA, I think that would be a fantastic idea. Just giving the new DC something more to work with, right? Bishop Fitzgerald from Florida State is one safety that has really caught my eye. Somebody who's a rangy type of guy, has a nose for the football, converts a lot of turnovers, helps out in the tackling game. Also, Cole Wiesniewski is another guy that you could really reach out. I've already talked about. I love the length in the deep DB room. That could really help you out. Will Harris, of course. Quan Martin being a backup would not be a bad idea. And then we've already talked about the outside with Trey Amos and Mikey, which leaves slot. What are you going to do there? And that's the big question. Do I think Fabian Moreau could transition there? I'm not 100% sure. You could go down the draft if you really wanted to. If you really want to divulge all your damn assets into defense, I wouldn't shoo it away. I wouldn't poo-poo it. But I would say at defensive end, a Reuben Bain, a David Bailey would be fantastic. I love the idea of that. I think Dietrich Wise and Dorrance Armstrong on the opposite side, having that rotation, a healthy rotation, is better for your defense. A lot of the best defenses in this league have a rotation at defensive end and defensive tackle. And so I think that's most important heading into this season. I wouldn't shy away Caleb Downs either, man. Caleb Downs is fantastic. In regards to Bobby, I saw somebody put this up on Twitter, and they're absolutely right. Bobby, I think, is like 50 tackles away from the all-time tackle record. And so maybe he wants to stay and be able to help out with that. I would not mind it, but obviously in a more condensed sort of role, allow Jordan McGee, Frankie Louvu to step in. And I've heard people speculate, does Jordan McGee give you the confidence that he could be able to wear the green dot? I do, based on the fact that this coaching staff at the end of the season was, when Bobby wasn't practicing, Jordan McGee was the one practicing at the mic with the green dot. So it's not like it's completely foreign to him. They've given that trust to him in practice, and maybe this coming into this season, that's what they were prepping him for. And so I think that's a fantastic fit, allowing Frankie Louvu to stay put, Kane Madrano working behind him in case of emergency. I think that's the best case scenario for this defense because we want to add speed, right? Speed. That's the one thing we took away from this season, was that speed was obviously evident. The lack of tackling was a legit thing. And those two things you have to be able to fix immediately for them to even progress and be able to help out this offense, be able to convert some more points and give them more wiggle room. And one thing about the Chicago Bears defense is they force a lot of turnovers this season. So it gave Caleb Williams and that offense more wiggle room to make mistakes, which Caleb was doing. But they were able to convert those turnovers to give their offense a little bit more help and being able to win these football games. That's what this football team needs to really be focused on, is tipping the scales in that regard and being able to help out the offense, give them a little bit more wiggle room. We cannot keep going down by 3 scores by the end of the first quarter in a lot of these games this season. I know Daronte Jones, the company, will be able to do that. But Jeff, in long-winded way of saying it, the attacking style, confusing, really going after it, that's what transitions to turnovers. It's not the hope that you rush for that your defense confuses anybody. No, you have to bring pressure in one way or another. And if you're not confident in your front four, then you got to confuse them, which is what Minnesota did this season. And I hope that this defense is going to mimic this time around, being able to get after it. And you're going to have to rely on your linebackers if you're going to have that defense to be able to get back in time so they're not hit over the middle. And I know that Daronte Jones has kind of like trap coverages techniques, and that will be implemented here. But that's why I like Jordan McGee and Frankie Louvu there. They can definitely get back in a fast way, but Frankie also has to play better. He can complain all day long about how he was utilized and deployed, but the fact is, you got to be able to be better in the passing game, and you got to be able to make some tackles, man. Now, the next question we have submitted, thank you, Jeff. This one from East. Who's more deserving of being in the Hall of Fame, Brian Mitchell or Bill Belichick?
Okay. Well, I think obviously both of them deserve to be in, but more deserving, I mean, I love B. Mitch, but I mean, Bill Belichick is like looked at as the GOAT coach of all time. So, and he should be first ballot. This whole thing is crazy and petty, but yeah, absolutely. I think both of them should be in, but I guess if you want to go more deserving, I think it obviously just based off all the accolades, it's Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy answer, Meest. I appreciate the question, but there is no question about it. Bill Belichick should be in the Hall of Fame. Like, you can make the argument that Bill would not have done all that without Tom Brady. Okay, I'll listen to that. You're probably right? But can you guarantee that Tom would have done that without Bill? Because I was not aware that Tom Brady was the one who intercepted Russell Wilson in the end zone, right? I was not aware that Tom Brady was the one in those defensive stands be able to help them win football games, and especially those Super Bowls. So the reason why it was easier on Tom Brady is the defense was always playing very well for New England. And that's because of how Bill Belichick deployed guys. And you could go down the list of Mike Vrabel of guys that he was able to deploy, and they was interchangeable. They just rotated guys out, and they were continuing to be a very good defense. Bill Belichick, this should not even be a question that he is a Hall of Fame coach. And this is literally petty. Like you said, I talked about this is planet ego, where somebody has control over something and they want to be able to make it harder on Bill Belichick because of some issue that they had with, I heard Spygate, Deflategate. Do whatever you want. But Bill Belichick was so good that he was just finding ways that were not written in code for rules in the NFL, and he was finding ways under it. And so, look, you could talk all you want. Those things are not the reason why he made it to the Super Bowl and did well. And you have to give credit to him. And so it's Bill Belichick, dude.
And to that point, like, if you want to say Deflategate, Spygate, all that stuff, that was in the second part of the dynasty. To your point about Tom Brady, that defense was the reason they won those first 3 Super Bowls. And he's a defensive coach. He was coaching up that defense. Tom Brady obviously had a part in it. He would make a throw here and there, and he was a leader or whatever, blah, blah, blah. He was developed by Bill Belichick, and he grew into that role. But those first 3 defenses with, like you said, Vrabel and Bruschi and Teddy McGinnis, Ty Law, those guys like that was all Bill Belichick. So just based off of the first dynasty that the Patriots had when they won 3 Super Bowls, he's a Hall of Fame coach based off of that, probably first ballot. So, and then at the end of the day, if you want to say because of Spygate, Deflategate, whatever, well, Tom Brady was there while they were winning the Super Bowls and doing that stuff too. So you're going to not say Tom Brady's first ballot because you kept Bill Belichick out as not a first ballot? It's just crazy.
It is crazy, but this is what happens that's why people can't be trusted with power, because they abuse it in this sort of way. This is their one chip that they have to use, and they're like, I'm going to get you this time. And it's one of those things where this is an easy decision, man. Like, if Bill Belichick isn't a first ballot Hall of Famer, good luck to everybody else, you know? And the whole saying, like, whose D do I got to suck to be able to make this happen? That's basically how they're working this thing, is like, you got to be on my good side to be able to get in the Hall of Fame, which is ridiculous. It's based off pedigree, it's based off a resume. And the other side of it is kind of ridiculous, in my personal opinion. So, and a lot of those Super Bowls were low scoring. It wasn't like Tom Brady was just beating everyone with his arm all day. Those were low scoring, and attribute that to the defense as well, which is my whole point about Jaden Daniels and building up this defense. Now, the next question that we have is from Tim Towner. Would you bring back Debo, and for how much? Or would you bring back Diami, and for how much?
You said Debo and what?
And Diami.
If Debo, if you want to take, like, what we paying him this year, like 18 mil, 20 mil, maybe 15 mil or something like that.
Something, yeah. And they converted the cash, for him.
So yeah, he's probably going to be looking at like 18 to 20 mil on the open market unless someone wants to overpay for him. So if he's willing to come back for somewhere between 18 to 20 million, then I'm all down for Debo coming back and being the number 2 opposite Terry, and we finally get to see that combination, hopefully, for a full season. And De'Ami Brown, $0 million. You can hit free agency and pick another team to go to, hopefully. I like what he contributed, and I think he's a good role wide receiver, like a good depth wide receiver. But we have Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane hopefully can be the next De'Ami Brown. Develop a little bit quicker and sooner, but he's a guy that's speedy, can get down the field, and hopefully he's going to develop a bigger route tree. But we have Jalen Lane to kind of be that new De'Ami Brown, so I would just stick with one wide receiver, big money wide receiver in free agency.
No, which is very funny. You being so much of a champion for adding wide receivers here, and I think it all comes down to money. It comes down to money.
I mean, I'm all for adding as many wide receivers, but to the point of developing a young team and building a core, you got to develop and you got to draft and develop it.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And I think ultimately it comes down to money. And if you can get Brandon Ayuk for cheaper than Debo and being able to re-sign here, then so be it. That's the route that we're going down. But there's only so much money allocated You still have to re-sign Laramie Tunsil, which they could convert that cap to a different year, of course, the way that the magicians in the front office can manipulate these contracts. So you can always go down that route, but there's only so much money, and you really do have to build up this defense, which goes into Tim's next question. And this one he asked, will we hold on to the number 7 pick and have to make a choice between edge Ruben Bain, and safety Caleb Downs? Who do you take today?
You said Ruben Baines or Caleb Downs?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, it would depend. For me, it would depend on what they do in free agency leading up to the draft. But I would say just because they've been missing that game-wrecking, hopeful game-wrecking edge defender, a guy that can demand a double team and free up other guys to do get one-on-ones and hopefully win their one-on-ones, get to the quarterback. Yeah, I'm just ready to have that defender on the edge that a defensive coordinator comes in and says, all right, we got a game plan around that guy. And obviously it might not happen right away in a rookie year. It might take a little bit, but yeah, I would say if it's between those two, I love Caleb Downs. I love the chess piece. It would be really, really, really hard to probably pass on the best player in the draft by a lot of people's evaluations, but I just personally need that edge defender that's going to strike terror in the opposing quarterback, hopefully. And, so I would have to go with Ruben Bain.
Yeah, because the big question here, Tim, is I've talked about this many times. With edges, you either have to trade for them or you have to draft them. Very rarely does a fantastic game-wrecking edge ever reach free agency. It just doesn't happen. They're so valuable. So you got to find a way to be able to get it done. And this being your most high pick, and you could say it's eerily similar to what San Francisco did the year that they had a high pick in getting Nick Bosa and what helped them. So I'd be willing to go down the route and say that does tend to lean towards Ruben Bain. But also you got to look at the scheme fit. And obviously, would that be able to translate for Washington, the kind of more heavy-footed kind of defensive end, the more prototypical type of defensive end, the thicker build, kind of a tree trunk, be able to solidify the edge? That is what really is captivating by Ruben Bain, and also his ability to get out to the passer. He's just a big dude. And that would fit the mold of what Dorrance Armstrong basically is. But also, you look at the defensive secondary and say, I need sure tacklers. I need somebody who could come in and lock up tight ends, which would go down the route of saying, okay, well, what do you do with Will Harris? Will Caleb Downs be a more free safety? Will Will Harris transition to free safety? And so these questions need to be asked. But I go down the route of saying, what is more valuable? And I love Caleb Downs, and I think that he would be a shoe-in fit here with this new defensive coach. But I also look at it to say, I know where the value is, and it's about time that we got an edge that we can develop. I know that we got Chase Young, but he didn't really develop here. It wasn't until he got to New Orleans we really saw him at the tip of his game. And so I think developing that edge with the new DC would be monumental going forward for this franchise. You got to be able to get after the passer, have a game wrecker in order to force turnovers, which is ultimately what Washington is trying to do at this point, enforcing turnovers. So as of right now, this is a really hard question. But I would go with Ruben Bain, unfortunately. I really like Caleb Downs. I think that, like, PFF has him rated number 1 overall of all their prospects. It's really hard to look away from Caleb Downs. But either or, I'm not going to be mad at, to be perfectly honest with you. We just need to add something to this defense. Cam Curl should have never left. He was great against tight ends, fantastic against the run, and Caleb Downs would basically be doing that for you. Yeah, a hell of a lot cheaper to keep Cam Curl than draft Caleb Downs, you know. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you made it this far, you're a freaking champion. Thank you to everybody who contributed to this episode. Thank you to Tim Towner. Thank you, Meast. Thank you, Jeff Miles. Thank you, Tony Franchise. Thank you, Mitch, for tuning in. We did talk about the standouts from the Senior Bowl and others. There's a list of so many. It's just hard to remember them right now of everyone that's standing out. But you do have to remember. Like, the NFL is just such a marketable product that even the practices at the Senior Bowl captivate everybody online, right? So, like, take that with a grain of salt. They are just practices. Let's see when the game film comes on and how they look. And of course, the Combine, the Underwear Olympics are coming up as well. And so just expect the inflammation to really happen with all of these prospects. All right, everybody. We'll see you again very soon. If not this week, next week. I'm Kyle.
Oh, I'm home. I didn't even hear you.
And we'll see you guys again.
A lot going on right now.
Washington football. Woo!
Hey.
What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video. Thanks again for all your support. Until next time.